when Special Forces Team Alpha hired Tariq Nazari as their translator for a high-risk mission in Afghanistan's Korengal Valley, they saw him as nothing more than a necessary local asset. Stay behind us, translate when we tell you, and don't get in the way, the team leader instructed dismissively. 3 days into the mission, Taliban forces executed a sophisticated ambush that killed their communications specialist and separated the team from extraction support. As enemy fire pinned them down from 3 sides, Tariq suddenly took command, barking precise tactical orders that contradicted the team leader's strategy. The soldiers initially resisted until Tariq revealed the truth. He wasn't just a translator, but a former deep-cover CIA operative who had spent 8 years embedded within the same terrorist network, now attacking them. What followed was one of the most extraordinary battlefield reversals in Special Forces history, as the mere interpreter transformed into the tactical mastermind that would save 17 elite soldiers from certain death. Forward Operating Base Chapman, Eastern Afghanistan. Present-day translate. Exactly what I say. Nothing more. Captain Reynolds instructed, barely making eye contact with their new interpreter. When we encounter locals, you speak only when I direct you to speak. Understood. Tariq Nazari nodded, with practiced deference. Yes, sir. Only when directed. Reynolds turned back to his team, effectively dismissing Tariq from his attention. The 12 members of Special Forces Team Alpha continued their mission briefing, discussing insertion points and contingency plans for their upcoming intelligence gathering operation in the Korengal Valley, an area notorious for heavy Taliban presence. Tariq faded into the background, positioning himself at the edge of the tent, where he could observe without being noticed. It was a skill he had perfected over many years, becoming invisible, despite being in plain sight. The Special Forces team's dismissive attitude toward him wasn't surprising. He was, to them, simply a necessary tool for communication, a local asset with basic security clearance, hired for his language skills, and nothing more. What they didn't know, what no one at FOB Chapman knew, was that Tariq Nazari wasn't merely a civilian interpreter. 8 years earlier, he had been recruited by the CIA for what became one of the agency's most ambitious deep-cover operations. Born in America to Afghan immigrants, with native fluency in Pashto, Dari, and 3 regional dialects, Tariq had been the perfect candidate for deep infiltration into Taliban networks along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. For nearly a decade, he had lived a carefully constructed identity as a mid-level facilitator between Taliban groups, gathering intelligence that had prevented dozens of attacks and led to the capture of 3 high-value targets. His extraction 6 months ago had been quiet, his cover still intact, a potentially valuable asset for future operations. Now officially, he was just another interpreter, his classified history known only to a select few at Langley. The arrangement suited Tariq. After years of high-stakes deception, the relative anonymity of a translator's role provided a welcome simplicity. As Team Alpha's briefing concluded, Sergeant Miller, the team's second-in-command, approached Tariq with equipment for the mission. Standard-issue translator kit, Miller said, handing him a vest and communications gear, body armor, emergency beacon, basic comms. Stay behind the team at all times. Maintain at least 15 meters distance during any engagement. Tariq accepted the equipment with an appropriately grateful nod. Thank you, Sergeant. Miller studied him briefly. You've worked with Special Forces before. 2 previous missions in Kandahar, Tariq replied, a half-truth that was part of his current cover story. Good. Then you know the drill. Don't try to be a hero. Don't touch any weapons. And if we come under fire, get down and stay down. Miller's tone wasn't unkind, merely matter-of-fact. We lose interpreters when they panic, or try to help. Don't be one of them. I understand, Tariq assured him, maintaining the demeanor expected of a civilian contractor, respectful, slightly deferential, and careful not to display any unexpected competencies that might raise questions. As Miller walked away, Tariq inspected the equipment he'd been given. The body armor was standard civilian contractor grade, adequate but significantly less protective than what the soldiers wore. The communications unit was basic, with limited channels. None of this surprised him. Interpreter safety was a consideration, but not a priority in operational planning. That night, as final preparations for the mission were underway, Tariq quietly inventoried his personal gear. Hidden in compartments of his seemingly ordinary backpack were items no regular interpreter would carry: a specialized blade of his own design, the compact satellite communications device that could bypass standard military channels, and detailed maps of cave systems in the Korengal region that weren't included in the official mission briefings. These precautions weren't due to any specific intelligence about the upcoming mission. Rather, they reflected habits formed during years where daily survival depended on preparation and self-reliance. Tariq had no reason to believe his translation services would involve anything beyond their stated purpose. Still, experience had taught him that in Afghanistan's conflict zones, situations could transform from routine to catastrophic in moments. As he finally settled in for a few hours of sleep before their pre-dawn departure, Tariq reflected on the irony of his position. After years orchestrating complex intelligence operations and advising on high-level strategy, he was now being instructed to stay out of the way by soldiers who had no idea of his background. The anonymity was in its way refreshing, a respite from years of constant vigilance and deception. Little did he know that within 72 hours, this carefully maintained anonymity would shatter completely. 3 days into the mission, Team Alpha had successfully gathered intelligence from 2 villages in the lower Korengal Valley. The operation had proceeded according to plan, almost too smoothly, Tariq thought, as they prepared to move toward their final objective. "Tell him we need to know about any Taliban movement in the northern passes," Captain Reynolds instructed Tariq during their final intelligence gathering meeting with a local elder. Tariq translated the question, but something in the elder's response triggered his finely tuned instincts. The man's answer was cooperative, providing exactly the information the Americans sought, but a subtle tension around his eyes told a different story. "He says there has been no Taliban activity in the northern passes for 2 weeks," Tariq translated accurately. What he didn't add was his growing certainty that the elder was lying, not about the absence of Taliban, but about the time frame. The information was too perfect, too aligned with what Team Alpha wanted to hear. As they departed the village, Tariq carefully studied their surroundings. Nothing seemed overtly threatening, yet something felt wrong. The village had been too quiet, the children too scarce. These were subtle indicators he had learned to recognize during his years undercover. "Captain," Tariq said quietly, as they moved through a narrow valley between steep ridgelines, "I believe we should consider an alternate route to the extraction point." Reynolds glanced back with mild irritation. "Is there a translation issue I should know about?" "No, sir," Tariq replied, maintaining his cover. "Just an observation about local patterns." "The village seemed." "We'll stick to the mission plan," Reynolds interrupted. "Save your observations for when we need translation." Tariq fell silent, resuming his designated position behind the main group. His unease continued to grow as they entered a particularly narrow section of the valley, a natural choke point, with limited visibility and even more limited escape routes. 8 years of living among Taliban strategists had taught him to recognize ideal ambush terrain. Sergeant Miller dropped back slightly, noticing Tariq's vigilance. "Something wrong." Tariq made a split-second decision to push slightly beyond his interpreter role. "This is perfect ambush territory, Sergeant," and the village elder's information seemed too convenient. Miller studied him with newfound interest. "You've got some security training." Before Tariq could respond, the world erupted in chaos. The sharp crack of sniper fire echoed through the valley as the team's point man dropped. Simultaneously, heavy machine gun fire opened up from multiple positions on the surrounding ridgelines. "Contact front and both flanks," Miller shouted, diving for cover behind a boulder. The team's disciplined response was immediate, returning fire while seeking defensive positions. But Tariq could see what the others couldn't yet recognize: this was no ordinary ambush. The Taliban positions had been carefully selected to cut off all retreat routes, while providing interlocking fields of fire. More concerning, the timing and coordination suggested they had expected Team Alpha at precisely this location. Specialist Wright, the team's communications expert, was hit while attempting to call for air support. As he fell, his radio equipment shattered against the rocks. "Comms down," someone shouted. Captain Reynolds moved quickly between covered positions, directing the team's defense, while Lieutenant Chen attempted to establish communications using backup equipment. "Set up defensive perimeter." Robinson, Jensen, high cover, North Ridge. Miller, coordinate suppressive fire, southern approach. Tariq took cover behind a large boulder, his mind racing. The ambush showed sophisticated planning, including electronic countermeasures that were jamming the team's remaining communications attempts. This level of coordination suggested involvement from one of the more advanced Taliban commanders, possibly someone he had encountered during his undercover years. As the firefight intensified, Tariq could see the tactical situation deteriorating rapidly. Team Alpha was pinned down, with at least 3 members wounded, their communications compromised, and darkness approaching. The Taliban forces were executing a classic constriction strategy, gradually tightening their positions while waiting for the Americans to exhaust their ammunition. Captain Reynolds was implementing standard Special Forces counter-ambush protocols, but Tariq immediately recognized they wouldn't work against this particular enemy configuration. The Taliban commander had anticipated these very responses and positioned his forces accordingly. When Reynolds ordered the team to consolidate toward the eastern ridge in preparation for a fighting retreat, Tariq knew he had to act. That direction would lead them directly into a secondary ambush position, a tactic he had personally observed this Taliban cell employ in previous operations. "Captain Reynolds," Tariq called out, abandoning his interpreter's demeanor. "The eastern route is compromised. They have a secondary position with at least 2 heavy machine guns covering that approach." Reynolds turned in surprise, both at Tariq's assertion and his suddenly authoritative tone. "Get down, and stay down, interpreter. We don't have time for civilian input." In that moment, Tariq made his decision. 8 years of deep cover, a carefully protected identity, and his official status, all would be compromised by what he was about to do. But the alternative was watching 17 men die in an ambush he could help them survive. Moving with the fluid efficiency of a trained operative, Tariq retrieved his hidden satellite communication device and approached Reynolds' position, ducking enemy fire with practiced ease. "Captain, you need to listen to me right now," Tariq stated, his voice transformed from the deferential interpreter to something entirely different, commanding, precise, and undeniably that of someone used to battlefield authority. "I know this Taliban unit and their commander. I know their tactics because I spent years gathering intelligence on them. The eastern route is a death trap, and your current defensive position will be overrun within 20 minutes. Reynolds stared at him in shock as Tariq continued. "I'm calling in specialized air support on a secure channel your team doesn't have access to. In the meantime, you need to split your forces, 2 fire teams creating diversions north and south, while your main element breaks contact through the western drainage culvert that isn't on your maps." "Who the hell are you?" Reynolds demanded, his expression a mixture of confusion and growing realization that the unassuming translator had just revealed himself to be something else entirely. "CIA Special Activities Division, formerly embedded with the exact network that's currently trying to kill us," Tariq replied simply. "And right now, I'm the only one who can get your team out alive." For several critical seconds, Captain Reynolds stared at Tariq, processing the shocking transformation of their seemingly ordinary interpreter into someone who was clearly a highly trained operative. "Prove it," Reynolds finally demanded, even as enemy fire intensified around their position. Without hesitation, Tariq detailed the exact composition of the Taliban force attacking them, including the names of key commanders, their weapons capabilities, and most convincingly, the specific tactical adaptations they had made in response to recent American operations. "They've positioned a D-K heavy machine gun on the northern ridge with approximately 2,000 rounds of ammunition. Their commander, Azim Haqqani, always positions his snipers in groups of 3, with 2 as diversions for the primary shooter." Tariq pointed to specific locations as he spoke. "Right now, they believe they've neutralized your communications and are expecting you to attempt exfiltration through either the Eastern Passage or by calling for helicopter extraction. Both approaches are covered by pre-sighted weapons." The specificity and confidence of Tariq's assessment was impossible to fake. As if to confirm his analysis, enemy fire intensified exactly where he had indicated the main Taliban positions would be. Lieutenant Chen, who had been attempting to restore communications, looked up. "Sir, he's right about our comms. They're using a sophisticated jamming system, targeting our specific frequencies." Reynolds made his decision. "What's your plan?" Tariq immediately shifted into full operational mode, all pretense of being a civilian interpreter completely abandoned. Using a stick, he quickly sketched a tactical map in the dirt. "We have 3 immediate objectives: disrupt their communications, create multiple diversions, and exfiltrate through this drainage system that isn't on standard maps." His hands moved with practiced precision as he outlined the strategy. "I need 4 men to create a diversion at these 2 points, synchronized exactly 3 minutes apart. Meanwhile, your main element will prepare the wounded for rapid movement." As he detailed the plan, Tariq simultaneously activated his hidden satellite communication device, bypassing the Taliban jamming systems. "I'm calling in specialized air support, not standard channels, but assets that can be here in approximately 27 minutes. The transformation was complete and undeniable. The unassuming translator, who had been ordered to stay out of the way, was now commanding the situation with an authority that could only come from years of high-level operational experience. Sergeant Miller was the first to openly acknowledge the shift. "You heard him," he said to the team, looking to Reynolds for confirmation. "Let's move." Reynolds nodded sharply, temporarily ceding tactical control to the CIA operative who had been hiding in plain sight. "Execute the plan." What followed was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Tariq coordinated the team's movements with precise timing, anticipating the Taliban's responses before they occurred. When the first diversionary team engaged, the enemy reacted exactly as Tariq had predicted, shifting resources away from the concealed drainage channel he had identified. "They'll realize it's a diversion in approximately 4 minutes, Tariq informed Reynolds, as they prepared the wounded for movement. "Their commander will order a sweep of all potential exfiltration routes, but they don't know about this one because it was created after their intelligence was gathered." Reynolds watched Tariq with a mixture of professional respect and lingering suspicion. "How long were you undercover with them?" 8 years, 4 months, Tariq replied matter-of-factly, while checking a wounded soldier's field dressing. "I was extracted 6 months ago, when my cover was potentially compromised during the Helmand Province operation." "And they assigned you as our interpreter?" Reynolds asked incredulously. Tariq allowed himself a small smile. "I requested the assignment. Langley thought I needed a low-stress transition roles after extraction. Apparently, interpreting for special forces qualified as low-stress." The irony wasn't lost on Reynolds. "Lucky for us." As the diversions drew Taliban fire, Tariq led the main element of Team Alpha toward the concealed drainage channel. His movements displayed a lifetime of operational experience, checking sight lines, maintaining awareness of team positioning, and constantly reassessing the tactical situation. They're adjusting faster than expected, Tariq noted as gunfire began to concentrate near their position. Haqqani must have brought in additional scouts from the Eastern Network. Without missing a beat, he modified the extraction plan, directing 2 soldiers to create an additional diversion while recalculating their approach to the drainage system. This rapid tactical adaptation, changing plans in response to enemy movements while maintaining overall strategic objectives, demonstrated a level of battlefield command that impressed even the veteran Special Forces operators. When they reached the drainage channel, Tariq took point, leading them through a complex system that wound beneath the valley floor. This was originally built by Soviet forces in the 1980s, he explained as they moved. The Taliban rediscovered it in 2010 and used it for weapons smuggling until 2018, when a partial collapse made them abandon it. I personally mapped this system during my 3rd year undercover. The team moved efficiently through the narrow passage, carrying their wounded and maintaining tactical spacing despite the difficult terrain. Tariq navigated with absolute confidence, occasionally pausing to listen for pursuit or check his specialized equipment for signals. After 20 minutes of tense movement through the underground system, they emerged into a small ravine, approximately 2 kilometers from the ambush site. Air support will arrive in 7 minutes, Tariq announced, checking his communication device. Secure perimeter, prepare for extraction, and watch the northwestern approach. They'll have patrols searching this general area once they realize they've lost contact. As the team established defensive positions, Reynolds approached Tariq. "I owe you an apology," the captain said quietly. Tariq shook his head. "You had no way of knowing. That was the point of my cover." Still, Reynolds insisted. "I dismissed you completely, treated you as an interpreter." Tariq finished for him, which was exactly what I was supposed to be. He checked his equipment again. Extraction approaching from the south. 2 minutes. The distinctive sound of helicopter rotors soon filled the air as specialized CIA assets, not the standard military extraction team, approached their position. The mission had transformed from a routine intelligence gathering operation into something that would generate classified after-action reports at the highest levels. As the helicopters touched down, Tariq maintained his operational focus, directing the loading of wounded and establishing perimeter security until the last team member was aboard. Only when they were airborne, safely away from the ambush site, did he finally allow himself to relax slightly. The soldiers of Team Alpha stared at him with new eyes, no longer seeing the invisible interpreter, but recognizing the elite operative who had saved their lives through skill, knowledge, and decisive leadership. Sergeant Miller said over the helicopter's intercom, "Just a translator." "Ha." For the first time since the mission began, Tariq laughed. "For a few days, yes, it was a nice break." Forward Operating Base Chapman. 48 hours later, the secure briefing room fell silent as the drone footage ended, showing the final moments of the ambush from an aerial perspective. Around the table sat an unusual mixture of military and intelligence leadership, representatives from Special Forces Command, Central Intelligence Agency senior staff, and the surviving members of Team Alpha. "As you can see, gentlemen," concluded the silver-haired CIA officer at the head of the table, "this wasn't a random engagement. Taliban forces had detailed intelligence about Team Alpha's mission, including their planned extraction route and communications protocols." Captain Reynolds, still showing signs of the firefight with a bandaged arm and facial lacerations, leaned forward. "Without interpreter Nazari's intervention, we would have walked directly into their secondary ambush position. Our entire team would have been lost." The room's attention shifted to Tariq, now dressed in operational CIA attire, Rather than his interpreter's clothing, the transformation went beyond his appearance. His entire demeanor had changed, displaying the quiet confidence of a senior intelligence operative. "Mr. Nazari," the general representing Special Forces Command addressed him, "I believe we're owed an explanation of exactly who you are and what you were doing with my men." The CIA officer interceded smoothly. "I can answer that, General. Tariq Nazari is one of our most successful deep cover operatives. For 8 years he infiltrated Taliban networks across the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, providing intelligence that prevented dozens of attacks against coalition forces and identifying key leadership targets." Screens around the room displayed declassified portions of Tariq's operational history, photographs showing him in various disguises, intelligence reports bearing his code name, and statistical analyses of operations influenced by his information. 6 months ago, the CIA officer continued, his position was potentially compromised during Operation Kingfisher. We extracted him and have been debating his next assignment. Following standard protocol for deep cover operatives, we placed him in a transitional role while conducting psychological evaluation and decompression. Reynolds couldn't contain his disbelief, and that transitional role was as our interpreter on a high-risk mission. "Actually," Tariq spoke for the first time, "I requested the assignment. After 8 years embedded with enemy forces, I wanted to experience working directly with American units." A hint of irony crossed his features. "Though I admit, I hadn't anticipated quite this level of involvement. The fact remains," interjected Lieutenant Chen, "that without Mr. Nazari's intervention, none of us would be sitting here. He not only identified the ambush tactics, but predicted enemy movements with uncanny accuracy and coordinated our extraction through terrain that wasn't on any of our maps." The general studied Tariq with newfound respect. "You maintained deep cover for 8 years with Taliban forces. That's almost unprecedented." "It came with certain cost," Tariq acknowledged simply, not elaborating on the personal toll of living a complete fabrication for nearly a decade, constantly surrounded by enemy combatants who would execute him without hesitation if his true identity were discovered. The CIA officer distributed classified folders to the military leadership. These contain the declassified portions of Mr. Nazari's operational history. "I think you'll find that many of your successful missions over the past 8 years were directly influenced by intelligence he provided, often at extreme personal risk." As the military officers reviewed the documents, expressions of surprise and growing respect spread across their faces. Sergeant Miller leaned toward Tariq. "That Taliban commander we captured in the Helmand Valley operation last year, that was your intelligence, wasn't it?" Tariq nodded slightly. "His name was Farid Dostum. I had been tracking his network for 3 years. That operation saved at least 200 civilian lives," Miller said quietly. "They had suicide bombers prepared for the Kabul markets." "I know," Tariq replied. "I helped build the vests." Seeing Miller's shock, he added, "Non-functional, of course. I was their explosives expert for the last 4 years of my cover." The implications of this revelation, the psychological burden of participating in terrorist operations while ensuring their failure, silenced further questions. The debriefing continued for several hours, with Tariq providing detailed analysis of the Taliban unit that had ambushed Team Alpha. His insights revealed a concerning evolution in enemy tactics and suggested a potential intelligence leak that had compromised the mission from its inception. "We believe someone with access to your operational planning provided information to the Taliban network," the CIA officer explained. "The ambush was too precisely coordinated, too specifically tailored to your team's standard protocols. This wasn't just about eliminating a special forces team," Tariq added. "It was a demonstration of capability, showing they could compromise high-level operations. The psychological impact would have been significant." As the briefing concluded, the general addressed the room. The official record will show that Team Alpha encountered enemy forces and successfully extracted with assistance from embedded intelligence assets. The specific details of Mr. Nazari's involvement and background will remain classified. He turned to Tariq directly. On behalf of Special Forces Command, I extend our formal gratitude. Your actions exemplify the highest traditions of service, regardless of which agency's badge you wear. As the meeting dispersed, Captain Reynolds approached Tariq privately. What happens to you now? Back to interpreting. Tariq smiled slightly. I believe my cover as an interpreter has been somewhat compromised. The agency has other plans for me, probably analytical work back in Langley for a while. Reynolds extended his hand. For what it's worth, you'd make one hell of a Special Forces officer. I appreciate that, Tariq replied, accepting the handshake. Though I've spent enough time in the field to last several lifetimes. The captain nodded, understanding. The men wanted me to tell you, whatever they called you before, whatever assumptions they made, they're sorry. No apologies needed, Tariq assured him. Being underestimated was part of my job for 8 years. It becomes almost comfortable after a while. As they parted ways, Tariq reflected on the irony of his situation. For 8 years he had posed as a Taliban facilitator, while secretly working for American interests. Then for a brief mission, he had posed as a simple interpreter, while being a CIA operative. Layers within layers, identities within identities. What remained constant through all those roles was his commitment to the mission. A dedication that had now saved 17 lives in a single operation, adding to the hundreds preserved by his years of dangerous undercover work. CIA Headquarters, Langley, Virginia. 1 month later. The ceremony was deliberately small, held in a secure conference room, rather than one of the CIA's more public spaces. Only those with direct knowledge of Tariq's operations were present. A mixture of intelligence officials and, somewhat unusually, the surviving members of Special Forces Team Alpha in their formal dress uniforms. The CIA director himself presented the Intelligence Star, the agency's highest honor for valor in the field, with minimal fanfare but evident respect. For exceptional service, under conditions of grave risk, the director read from the citation, displaying extraordinary courage and professional excellence, while embedded with hostile forces, for a duration unprecedented in modern intelligence operations. As Tariq accepted the medal, his expression remained composed, though those who knew him well could detect the emotion beneath his disciplined exterior. 8 years of his life spent living a lie, forming relationships with people he was actively working against, making decisions daily that could have resulted in his immediate execution if discovered, all acknowledged in a brief ceremony that would never be made public. After the formal presentation, Captain Reynolds approached, extending his hand. To Tariq's surprise, the Special Forces officer rendered a crisp salute before the handshake, a military courtesy rarely offered to civilian intelligence personnel. The men insisted on being here, Reynolds explained, indicating the members of Team Alpha, who stood at respectful attention. They wanted to properly thank the man who saved their lives. Tariq nodded his appreciation, somewhat uncomfortable with the direct recognition, after so many years operating in the shadows. How are your wounded? All recovering well, Reynolds confirmed. Lieutenant Chen returns to active duty next week. Even Specialist Wright is expected to make a full recovery, thanks to your emergency medical assistance during the extraction. Sergeant Miller joined them, his normally stern expression softened with genuine respect. We've been briefed on some of your previous operations, the parts they could tell us anyway. He shook his head in amazement. 8 years maintaining deep cover, constantly at risk, no extraction plan for most of it. I don't know how you did it. Tariq considered the question thoughtfully. You adapt, create compartments in your mind, remember why you're doing it. He glanced at the photographs displayed nearby, images of successful operations influenced by his intelligence, representing hundreds of lives saved. Some days were harder than others. The unspoken understanding passed between them, the profound isolation of operating alone in hostile territory, the psychological toll of maintaining a false identity for years on end, the constant vigilance required to avoid discovery. These were burdens familiar to Special Forces operators, though rarely sustained for the duration Tariq had endured. "The team has something for you," Reynolds said, nodding to Miller, who presented Tariq with a shadow box containing Team Alpha's unit patch and a specially designed emblem commemorating the Korengal Valley operation. "You're the only non-Special Forces personnel to ever receive this," Miller explained. "The men voted unanimously. As far as we're concerned, you were one of us that day." Tariq accepted the gift with genuine appreciation. After years where his accomplishments necessarily remained unacknowledged, the simple recognition held profound meaning. As the ceremony concluded and attendees began to disperse, the CIA's Deputy Director of Operations approached Tariq. "Your new office is ready," she informed him. "Analysis Division South Asia Desk, with direct reporting lines to the Counter-Terrorism Task Force." Tariq nodded his acceptance. After the intensity of field operations, the transition to analytical work represented a significant adjustment, but also the opportunity for a more sustainable lifestyle after years of continuous stress. "There's significant interest in your insights on Taliban tactical evolution," the deputy director continued. "Your experience bridges intelligence and direct combat operations in a way few analysts can match." "I understand," Tariq replied. "I'll begin compiling comprehensive assessments immediately." As the deputy director departed, Tariq found himself momentarily alone, contemplating the strange journey that had brought him to this point. From deep cover operative to emergency battlefield commander to intelligence analyst, roles that had demanded different aspects of his abilities and character. Captain Reynolds approached one final time before departing. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said. "That first day when I told you to stay back and translate when told, was it difficult taking orders like that, knowing what you really were?" Tariq smiled slightly. "Actually, it was almost refreshing. Simple, clear expectations with no life or death consequences if I missed some subtle social cue." His expression grew more thoughtful. "When you live undercover for years, you sometimes lose track of your authentic self. Playing a straightforward role like just a translator was oddly restful." Reynolds nodded understanding. "And now, back to being your authentic self. I'm not sure I remember exactly who that is," Tariq admitted, "but I have time to rediscover him now." As Team Alpha departed for their next deployment, and the CIA personnel returned to their classified work, Tariq made his way to his new office in the Analysis Division. The space was modest but private, with high-security terminals and the resources he would need for his new role. On the desk lay a simple folder marked Personnel Assignment, Nazari. Opening it, he found not only his official posting to the Analysis Division, but an additional document that caught him by surprise: an option for field consultant status on selected Special Forces operations. The attached note from the deputy director explained, "Your unique combination of deep cover experience and tactical battlefield leadership demonstrated in the Korengal Valley incident represents a capability we cannot afford to sideline entirely. While your primary role will remain analytical, Captain Reynolds has specifically requested your availability as consultant for operations targeting the networks you infiltrated." Tariq sat at his desk, considering this unexpected development. After 8 years of living a lie, followed by the intensity of the ambush and extraction, he had anticipated, perhaps even looked forward to Mitasimi, the relative normalcy of analytical work. Yet something in him responded to the prospect of continuing to make a direct difference in the field, albeit in a more controlled, less isolated capacity. 6 months later, Pentagon Strategic Operations Center. "The target has modified his security protocols," the Special Forces mission planner explained, pointing to surveillance photographs displayed on the briefing room's main screen. Previous infiltration approaches are no longer viable. Around the table sat members of a joint task force, military special operations personnel, and intelligence officers, collaborating on a high-priority operation targeting a Taliban splinter group that had recently emerged as a significant threat. Captain Reynolds, recently promoted to major, turned to the CIA representative seated at his right. "Tariq, you operated with this group's predecessor cell. What's your assessment?" Tariq Nazari studied the intelligence materials thoughtfully. In the 6 months since the Korengal Valley incident, he had settled into his unique position, primarily an intelligence analyst, but increasingly a vital bridge between the CIA's information-gathering capabilities and the special forces teams that executed operations based on that intelligence. Their modified security reflects adaptive learning from previous compromises, Tariq observed. However, they've overlooked a vulnerability in their communication structure. He indicated a specific pattern in the data. Their religious council still meets using the traditional protocols I documented in 2019. That presents an insertion opportunity for a limited duration operation. The room's attention focused on his analysis, not with the dismissive skepticism he had once faced as just a translator, but with the respectful consideration due to an acknowledged expert, whose insights had repeatedly proven decisive. This transformation in how his contributions were valued represented perhaps the most significant change in Tariq's professional life. After years where his expertise had to remain concealed, followed by the dramatic revelation during the ambush, he now operated in an environment where his unique capabilities were fully recognized and deliberately integrated into operational planning. "We can establish a cover approach through these tribal connections," Tariq continued, outlining a potential infiltration strategy. "However, it would require precise cultural knowledge and linguistic capabilities beyond standard training." Major Reynolds nodded understanding. "Would you be willing to provide direct support for the infiltration team, not field deployment?" he clarified quickly, "but comprehensive cultural and tactical preparation." "Of course," Tariq agreed. This had become his new operational model, not returning to deep cover or direct combat roles, but applying his hard-won expertise to ensure other operatives had the knowledge they needed to succeed. The briefing continued, with Tariq's insights helping shape an operation that combined intelligence precision with special operations capabilities. The collaborative approach represented a significant evolution from the traditional separation between intelligence gathering and military action, an evolution that Tariq had helped pioneer. Later, as the meeting concluded, Reynolds approached Tariq privately. "The joint operations model is working better than anyone anticipated," the major observed. "Headquarters is calling it the Nazari Protocol now. This integration of deep intelligence expertise directly into operational planning." Tariq raised an eyebrow in surprise. "They named a protocol after me." Informally, Reynolds smiled. "But yes, your contribution in the Korengal changed more than just that one operation. It's reshaping how we approach these missions entirely." For someone who had spent most of his career invisible by necessity, this acknowledgement held special significance. Tariq had never sought recognition. The nature of his work had made that impossible, but the knowledge that his experience was creating lasting improvement in how operations were conducted represented a different kind of achievement. "Team Alpha deploys next week with the new approach," Reynolds continued. "The men asked me to tell you they'll be carrying this with them." He handed Tariq a photograph showing the team's equipment, each member now sporting a small patch with Arabic script. Tariq translated the text, and couldn't suppress a smile. "The invisible are essential," seemed appropriate. Reynolds replied, "For the man everyone underestimated until he saved their lives." As they parted ways, the military officer to prepare his team for deployment, the intelligence expert to refine the analytical products that would support them. Tariq reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this point. He had begun as a deep cover operative, living among enemies while collecting the information needed to counter their operations. Then briefly, by circumstance rather than design, he had become a battlefield commander, directly leading elite soldiers through a crisis that would have claimed their lives without his intervention. Now he occupied a unique position between these worlds, his experience and expertise forming a bridge between intelligence gathering and operational execution. In his office back at Langley, Tariq kept few personal items. Habits of operational security remained ingrained even in secure surroundings. But prominently displayed on his desk was the shadow box Team Alpha had presented him, containing their unit patch and the special commendation. Beside it stood a simple frame containing a quote that had sustained him through his years undercover, the words of Edward Everett Hale, written over a century earlier, but still profoundly relevant to those who served in the shadows. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. For 8 years, Tariq had lived those words in the most challenging circumstances imaginable, isolated, surrounded by enemies, constantly at risk of discovery and death. Then, in a critical moment when 17 lives hung in the balance, he had stepped from the shadows to apply his unique capabilities directly. Now, he continued to serve in a new capacity, still making a difference, still applying his hard-won knowledge, but with the profound difference of being seen and valued for his true capabilities, rather than dismissed as just a translator. The legacy of those few dramatic hours in the Korengal Valley extended far beyond the lives saved that day. It had created a new model for integration between intelligence and operations, highlighted the vital importance of cultural and linguistic expertise in modern warfare, and demonstrated how quickly assumptions about capability could prove not just wrong but dangerously misguided. As Tariq prepared for his next briefing, analyzing emerging threats and helping shape the operations that would counter them, he carried with him the lessons of both his years in deep cover and that pivotal day when circumstance had forced him to reveal his true identity and capabilities. The most effective operators were often those who remained invisible until the moment their specialized skills became essential. The most valuable team members were sometimes those initially dismissed or overlooked, and sometimes the difference between mission failure and success came down to recognizing expertise wherever it appeared, even from the unassuming interpreter, ordered to stay back and translate when told. If this incredible story of hidden heroes and battlefield revelations captured your imagination, hit that subscribe button to join our community. Have you ever discovered that someone you knew had unexpected skills or a surprising background? Share your experiences in the comments below. We read every single one, and would love to hear your stories. Do you think there are more invisible heroes around us than we realize? Let us know your thoughts, and don't forget to turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss our daily uploads of extraordinary true stories that remind us heroes often hide in plain sight.